A barren impact crater purchase ridiculed by renowned geologists conceals an extraordinary secret that transforms a struggling single mother's life forever. Mysterious metallic specimens begin surfacing throughout the forsaken landscape, defying every scientific explanation known to modern geology. What she eventually discovers buried deep within the crater's core not only silences her harshest critics, but reveals a $300 million meteorite treasure that changes her family's destiny for generations to come. Asterisk, asterisk. Before we dive into this incredible true story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. And if tales of triumph against impossible odds inspire you, smash that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you an even more unbelievable discovery that will blow your mind. Asterisk, asterisk. Dr. Isabella Rodriguez had always been labeled a dreamer by everyone in her life. As a single mother of 3 young children working part-time as a geology professor at Southwestern Nevada University, her colleagues insisted her latest decision was absolute proof that she had finally crossed the line from ambitious to completely delusional. Standing at the rim of the massive circular depression in the earth that she now somehow owned, Isabella couldn't entirely disagree with their harsh assessment of her judgment. $72,000 for what's essentially a giant hole in the middle of nowhere? She muttered under her breath, watching a small stone tumble down the steep crater walls into the shadows below. Maybe they were all right about me losing my mind. The brutal Nevada desert sun beat down mercilessly on the 320-foot wide crater, creating stark shadows that highlighted its almost perfectly symmetrical shape against the rust-colored landscape of the Mojave Desert. Her faithful border collie Luna bounded enthusiastically around the crater's perimeter, seemingly unbothered by what many would consider her owner's most questionable life choice to date. Isabella's financial situation had been a constant source of stress since her husband Carlos died in a construction accident 4 years earlier, leaving her to raise their children Sophia, 15, Miguel, 12, and little Carmen, 8, and a professor's part-time salary that barely covered their basic needs. Every grocery trip required careful calculation. Every unexpected expense meant choosing between necessities. The modest life insurance settlement from Carlos's death had been their only financial cushion, carefully preserved in a savings account marked Children's Education Fund that Isabella had sworn never to touch except for genuine emergencies. Yet here she stood, having just spent virtually every dollar of that sacred fund on what most rational people would consider completely worthless desert real estate. The journey to this moment had begun 6 months earlier, when Isabella was conducting routine research for her undergraduate Earth Sciences course. She had been searching government databases for mineral rights case studies when she stumbled across an obscure federal land disposal auction website. Most of the listings were mundane, abandoned military structures, surplus farmland, decommissioned facilities, but one entry had made her pause mid-scroll. Asterisk, asterisk, meteor impact site, Thunderhawk crater, 95 acres, geological research potential, starting bid. 45,000. The accompanying satellite images showed a nearly perfect circular depression in the Nevada desert, surrounded by mineral composition, reports that immediately captured Isabella's professional attention. The crater's mathematical precision was striking, too perfect for natural erosion, too preserved for an ancient impact site. But it was the preliminary geological data that truly intrigued her. Isabella had dedicated 12 years of her life to studying extraterrestrial geology before family tragedies and financial necessities forced her to abandon her full-time research career. Her doctoral dissertation, Rare Mineral Compositions and Extraterrestrial Impact Sites, had earned recognition in 3 major geological journals and established her as a rising expert in meteorite science. She had been on track for a prestigious research position at the Smithsonian when Carlos's accident shattered those dreams along with her heart. Now, 4 years later, hunched over her laptop at 2 a.m. while her children slept peacefully in their beds, studying these intriguing satellite images and mineral reports, that long-dormant flame of scientific passion had suddenly roared back to life. The mineral readings included in the auction listing were unlike anything Isabella had encountered in her years of research. The iron-to-nickel ratios were completely inconsistent with typical meteorite compositions, while trace elements suggested the presence of materials that shouldn't exist in any known Earth-based formation. Most intriguingly, the magnetic field measurements showed subtle but persistent anomalies that indicated something metallic and substantial buried beneath the crater floor. "Mama, are you seriously considering buying a giant hole in the desert?" her eldest daughter Sophia had asked the next morning. Finding Isabella surrounded by printed geological surveys and topographical maps spread across their small kitchen table. Sophia had inherited her father's practical nature and her mother's sharp intellect, making her observations consistently insightful despite her young age. At 15, she had already begun expressing interest in following her mother's path into science. Though her focus leaned toward marine biology rather than geology. "It's not just a hole, Mia," Isabella had explained, trying to contain her growing excitement while simultaneously questioning her own sanity. "Look at these mineral concentration readings. They're completely inconsistent with the surrounding geological formations. This could represent something genuinely unprecedented in meteorite science." Isabella spread out the official survey reports, pointing to the columns of data that had captivated her attention. "See these numbers here? The magnetic field variation suggests there's something large and metallic, buried approximately 15 to 20 feet below the surface. Previous surveys dismissed it as iron or deposits, but the distribution pattern is all wrong for natural mineral formation." "But what if you're wrong?" her son Miguel had asked, with the practical wisdom that often surprised her in a 12-year-old. "What if you spend all of Daddy's insurance money and there's nothing special there at all?" Miguel bore a striking resemblance to his father, with the same dark eyes and serious expression that Carlos had worn when discussing important family decisions. The boy had matured rapidly since his father's death, often acting as the man of the house despite his young age. His question carried the weight of genuine concern for their family's financial security. Isabella had felt her heart clench at the mention of Carlos and the sacrifice his death benefits represented. Miguel was absolutely right to be concerned. This decision could either transform our family's future or destroy the financial security Carlos had died to provide for them. "That's a fair question," Miguel Isabella had acknowledged, sitting down at the table so she could look her son directly in the eyes. "The truth is, there's always risk in following your instincts over conventional wisdom. But my training tells me there's something extraordinary about this site that previous researchers have missed or misunderstood." She had pulled out her laptop and opened the geological database where she'd been conducting additional research. "I've spent the past 3 weeks analyzing every available study of this crater. 4 different teams have surveyed it over the past 20 years, and they all reached the same conclusion. It's just an unusual erosion feature with some interesting but ultimately mundane mineral deposits." "So why do you think they're all wrong?" Sophia had asked, settling into the chair beside her mother with genuine curiosity. "Because I think they were all looking for the wrong thing," Isabella had explained, her excitement growing as she articulated her theory for the first time. Every team approached this as a potential meteorite impact site, and concluded it wasn't one because the mineral signatures didn't match typical iron meteorite compositions. But what if it's not a typical meteorite at all? Isabella had clicked through several research papers on her laptop screen, showing her children examples of rare meteorite classifications. "There are types of extraterrestrial objects we've never found intact on Earth materials that would create completely different geological signatures than anything in our textbooks. If the Thunderhawk crater contains one of these rare specimens, it would explain why every conventional analysis has failed to recognize its significance." Little Carmen had appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed unicorn, her hair still messy from sleep. At 8 years old, she possessed the kind of fearless curiosity that made her ask questions adults were often afraid to voice. "Mama, will finding space rocks make us rich, like in the movies?" Carmen had asked, with characteristic directness. The innocent question had hit Isabella harder than all the practical concerns. Combined, her children deserved better than hand-me-down clothes and generic grocery store cereal. They deserved the educational opportunities that money could provide. The security of knowing their future was protected. Sophia had been talking about marine biology summer programs that cost more than Isabella's monthly salary. Miguel showed exceptional aptitude for mathematics and engineering, but would need significant financial support to pursue those interests. Carmen was still young, but every parent dreamed of being able to provide unlimited opportunities for their children's development. "I don't know about getting rich, baby girl," Isabella had answered honestly, pulling Carmen onto her lap. "But if Mama is right about what's buried in that crater, it could help us afford the things we've been dreaming about: college for Sofia and Miguel. Those science camps you've been wanting to attend, maybe even a bigger house where everyone has their own bedroom." The conversation had continued through breakfast, with each of her children asking increasingly sophisticated questions about the risks and potential rewards of the investment. Isabella found herself both proud of their analytical thinking and terrified by the responsibility their questions highlighted. This wasn't just her money she was risking. It was their security, their future, their father's final gift to them. Over the following weeks, Isabella had thrown herself into researching every aspect of the Thunderhawk crater with an intensity she hadn't felt since her graduate school days. She had contacted former colleagues, reviewed academic papers, and even reached out to international experts in meteorite science. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that previous surveys had missed something crucial. The crater's location was particularly intriguing. Historical records showed that it sat on land that had been deliberately avoided by Native American tribes for centuries before European settlement. Oral traditions from 3 different tribal groups contained remarkably similar stories about the site, references to the place where the star fell, and warnings about ground that burns with skyfire. While such folklore was typically dismissed by modern science, Isabella's anthropological training had taught her that indigenous oral histories often contained kernels of observational truth passed down through generations. More compelling was the pattern of failed commercial ventures in the area. Since the 1940s, 7 different mining companies had attempted to establish operations near the crater, all abandoning their efforts after encountering what their reports described as unusual equipment malfunctions and inexplicable geological conditions. The most recent attempt in 2018, it involved a major copper mining corporation that had invested over $2 million in preliminary development before abruptly ceasing operations and selling their mineral rights for a fraction of their investment. Isabella had managed to obtain copies of several geological surveys through her university's academic network, and the pattern was consistently puzzling. Every team reported the same basic findings: an unusually well-preserved circular depression, with interesting but not commercially valuable mineral deposits. Yet each survey also included footnotes about anomalous readings, equipment calibration issues, recommendations for further study that suggested the researchers had encountered phenomena they couldn't adequately explain or categorize. The online auction had been surprisingly competitive, with bidding escalating far beyond Isabella's comfort zone. She had initially set a maximum limit of $50,000, already more than she could realistically afford, but found herself caught up in the competition as the price climbed higher. Other bidders clearly saw value in the property that went beyond its geological potential, possibly viewing it as a land speculation investment or development opportunity. At $65,000, Isabella had seriously considered withdrawing from the auction. The rational part of her mind was screaming warnings about financial responsibility and the risks of single-parent decision-making. But as she watched the bidding continue, something deeper than logical analysis had taken control. Her scientific instincts, developed through years of rigorous training and research experience, were overwhelming her practical concerns with absolute certainty that this site contained something extraordinary. When the bidding reached $70,000 and several other participants dropped out, Isabella had found herself placing a final, desperate bid of $72,000, amount that represented nearly every penny of their family's emergency savings and educational fund. The 3 minutes between her bid and the auction's end had felt like hours, during which Isabella experienced every emotion from euphoria to absolute terror. When the auction ended and she received the winning notification email, Isabella had stared at her computer screen in stunned silence. She had either just made the most brilliant investment of her life or committed the most catastrophic financial mistake imaginable. Breaking the news to her department colleagues had been even more challenging than explaining it to her children. Isabella had decided to approach Dr. Margaret Steinberg, her department head, privately, before the news became general knowledge among the faculty. "Isabella, please tell me you did not actually purchase the Thunderhawk Crater property, Doctor," Steinberg had said, when Isabella mentioned her successful bid during what was supposed to be a routine academic advising meeting. The department head's voice carried a tone of disappointment that made Isabella feel like a scolded graduate student, rather than a respected colleague with a doctorate in geological sciences. Dr. Steinberg was a woman in her early 60s who had built her career through methodical, conservative research approaches that prioritized academic safety over breakthrough discoveries. She had always been supportive of Isabella's career, particularly during the difficult transition to single parenthood, but her expression now suggested that support had its limits. "Why? What's the problem with that site?" Isabella had asked. Though Dr. Steinberg's reaction was already causing her stomach to twist with dread. That formation has been thoroughly examined by no fewer than 4 separate geological survey teams over the past 2 decades. Dr. Steinberg had explained with barely concealed frustration. Dr. Harrison Blake from the University of Arizona led the most comprehensive study in 2019. Dr. Rebecca Chen from Colorado School of Mines conducted mineral analysis in 2017. Dr. Michael Torres from New Mexico Tech performed structural assessment in 2015. Every single investigation has reached the same conclusion: it's nothing more than an unusually well-preserved erosion feature created by ancient underground water systems. Dr. Steinberg had pulled out a thick folder from her filing cabinet containing what appeared to be copies of multiple research reports. The mineral anomalies that apparently caught your attention have been definitively attributed to prehistoric volcanic activity in the region. The magnetic field variations you're probably interpreting as evidence of buried metallic objects are caused by iron oxide deposits distributed throughout the subsurface geology. Isabella had felt her confidence wavering as Dr. Steinberg continued her methodical destruction of every argument that had convinced her to make the purchase. Furthermore, the site has been designated by the state of Nevada as having no commercial mining potential and no significant research value. The previous owner, a mining consortium, spent over $3 million on exploration before concluding that the property was essentially worthless for any practical purpose. Dr. Steinberg had leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting from professional frustration to personal concern. "Isabella, I understand that your financial situation has been challenging since Carlos passed away. I know how difficult it's been to balance single parenthood with academic responsibilities while maintaining your research interests. But that $72,000 represented your children's educational security. Instead, you've purchased nearly 100 acres of geologically insignificant desert land that you'll never be able to resell for even a fraction of what you paid." The criticism had stung particularly deeply because Isabella respected Dr. Steinberg's expertise and had always valued her mentorship. The department head had been one of the few senior faculty members who had supported Isabella's transition from full-time research to part-time teaching, understanding the impossible pressures of single parenthood in academia. But even more devastating, feedback was yet to come. Dr. Harrison Blake, the Southwest's most renowned expert on meteorite impact geology, and the scientist whose work had partly inspired Isabella's doctoral research, had agreed to speak with her by phone about the Thunderhawk crater purchase. Dr. Rodriguez, I'm afraid you've made what can only be described as a serious professional and financial error, Dr. Blake had said during their conversation, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in the field. In over 200 published papers on extraterrestrial geology, I personally led a comprehensive survey of that exact site in 2019. Using ground-penetrating radar, magnetic resonance imaging, and core sampling techniques, the Thunderhawk Formation is textbook erosional geology with absolutely no extraterrestrial significance whatsoever. Isabella had attempted to present her analysis of the mineral composition data, but Dr. Blake had dismissed her observations with the kind of academic authority that was difficult to challenge. The mineral readings you're interpreting as evidence of meteorite impact have perfectly mundane explanations rooted in the region's well-documented geological history. The iron-nickel ratios you find intriguing, are consistent with ancient volcanic intrusions. The magnetic anomalies are caused by magnetite deposits that are common throughout the Southwest. But the distribution patterns Isabella had begun are entirely consistent with subsurface water flow and mineralization processes that occurred over thousands of years. Dr. Blake had interrupted with obvious impatience. "Isabella, I've known you since your graduate school days, when you attended my lectures at the Geological Society meetings. You're a capable researcher with solid analytical skills, but you're allowing financial desperation to cloud your scientific judgment. There is no meteorite, no valuable materials, and certainly no research potential worth $72,000 at that location." The conversation had ended with Dr. Blake's promise to reach out to some contacts who might be willing to purchase the property from Isabella at a significantly reduced price, essentially offering to help her minimize her losses on what he clearly considered a catastrophic mistake driven by emotional rather than scientific reasoning. Similar warnings and expressions of concern had come from every geological expert Isabella consulted over the following weeks. Dr. Susan Chen, a specialist in Southwest geology at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, had described the purchase as career suicide and suggested that Isabella's judgment had been compromised by grief and financial pressure. Dr. Michael Torres, her former dissertation advisor, and a man whose opinion she valued tremendously, had recommended that Isabella seek counseling to address what he diplomatically termed stress-induced decision-making patterns often seen in struggling single parents. Each conversation had chipped away at Isabella's confidence, making her question not only her professional judgment, but her fitness as a mother. Could she justify risking her children's financial security on what appeared to be, according to every expert opinion, a geological fantasy born of desperation and wishful thinking? The doubts had multiplied during sleepless nights when Isabella found herself staring at the ceiling, calculating exactly how many months of mortgage payments $72,000 represented, how many years of her children's educational expenses she had potentially squandered, Sophia's dreams of marine biology summer programs, Miguel's need for advanced mathematics tutoring, Carmen's interest in art classes. All of these opportunities might have been sacrificed for a hole in the desert that every expert in the field considered worthless. But despite the overwhelming professional consensus against her decision, despite the very real possibility that she had destroyed her family's financial future, Isabella couldn't shake an inexplicable conviction that everyone was overlooking something crucial about the Thunderhawk crater. The formation's characteristics seemed too unique, precise to be explained by simple erosion or ancient volcanic activity. Late at night, when her children were asleep and the house was quiet, Isabella would spread out the geological survey reports and satellite images on her kitchen table, studying every detail with the intensity she had once brought to her doctoral research. There were subtle anomalies in the mineral distribution patterns that didn't quite fit the erosional theory, microscopic inconsistencies in the soil composition that suggested more complex geological processes than simple water weathering. Most intriguingly, were gaps in every survey reporters where instruments had malfunctioned or provided inconclusive readings that the researchers had dismissed as equipment errors. The night before her planned first visit to the crater, Isabella sat at her kitchen table reviewing her decision one final time. The rational part of her mind cataloged all the reasons this was a mistake: the unanimous expert opinion against, the site's significance, her family's precarious financial situation, the very real possibility that she was about to discover $72,000 worth of ordinary desert sand. But her scientific instincts, developed through years of rigorous training and research experience, were screaming that something extraordinary was waiting to be discovered at the Thunderhawk crater. Every expert opinion felt incomplete. Every survey report seemed to be missing crucial details that only hands-on investigation could reveal. Sophia found her mother still sitting at the table when she came down for breakfast the next morning, surrounded by papers and looking like she hadn't slept at all. "Mama, are you really going to go look at your crater today?" Sophia asked, her tone carrying the careful neutrality teenagers used when they thought their parents were making questionable decisions, but didn't want to be disrespectful. "Yes, Mia," Isabella replied, gathering her papers with renewed determination. I'm going to find out what's really out there. What if everyone else is right and there's nothing special about it? Miguel asked, joining his sister at the breakfast table while pouring cereal into his bowl with the methodical precision he applied to everything in his life. Isabella looked at her children, these three beautiful souls, who depended on her for everything, who deserved a mother who made wise decisions that protected their future rather than jeopardizing it. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force, making her question every aspect of the choice she had made. Then I'll have learned an expensive lesson about trusting my instincts over expert opinion. She answered honestly. But what if everyone else is wrong? What if there's something incredible waiting out there that could change our lives forever? What if this is the opportunity we've been praying for since your father died? Little Carmen appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed unicorn, her hair still messy from sleep, but her eyes bright with the kind of innocent optimism that made Isabella's heart ache with love and protective fear. Mama, are you going to find treasure like the pirates in my storybooks? Carmen asked, climbing onto Isabella's lap with complete trust in her mother's ability to make everything work out perfectly. Isabella held her youngest daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her children's shampoo and feeling the enormous weight of their faith in her judgment. I don't know what I'm going to find, baby girl, but whatever happens, we're going to face it together as a family, just like we always do. The rest of that morning passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Isabella loaded her field equipment into their aging Honda Civic geological sampling tools. A portable metal detector borrowed from the university, ground penetrating, radar equipment, and enough camping supplies for an overnight stay if the investigation required more time than anticipated. She had arranged for her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to watch the children after school, telling them she would return by dinner time with a full report on their space rock adventure. She prepared to leave. Isabella felt the familiar mixture of scientific excitement and parental terror that had defined so many moments since Carlos's death. She was either about to vindicate the most important decision of her life or confirm it's the most expensive mistake she had ever made. There was no middle ground. Either the Thunderhawk crater contained something extraordinary that would transform their lives, or she had just spent her children's educational future on worthless desert real estate. The drive to the crater would take 3 hours through increasingly desolate Nevada landscape, long highways that grew progressively more remote until she would be traveling on unmarked desert roads with no cell phone coverage and no possibility of assistance. If something went wrong, it was exactly the kind of risk that responsible single mothers weren't supposed to take. But Isabella had passed the point where conventional wisdom held any appeal. As she pulled out of their driveway with Luna riding shotgun in her equipment, secured in the back seat, Isabella caught sight of her children waving from the front window. Their faces showed a mixture of excitement and concern that perfectly mirrored her own emotions. Sophia's expression carried the weight of someone who understood the financial implications of what her mother was attempting. Miguel looked serious and supportive, like a young man shouldering responsibility beyond his years. Carmen was simply enthusiastic about the adventure, trusting completely in her mother's ability to find treasure and solve their problems. "This is it, Luna," Isabella said to her four-legged companion as they headed toward the desert highway. "Either we're about to discover something that will secure my children's future forever, or we're about to confirm that their mother has completely lost her mind and destroyed everything Carlos worked to provide for them." The faithful border collie simply wagged her tail, offering the kind of unconditional support that Isabella desperately needed as she drove toward what would either be the vindication of her professional instincts or the confirmation of her scientific colleague's worst fears about her judgment. The 3-hour drive to the Thunderhawk crater took Isabella through some of the most desolate landscapes she had ever encountered. As her Honda Civic left the familiar suburbs of Las Vegas behind, the scenery gradually transformed from urban sprawl to scattered desert communities, then to endless stretches of sagebrush and Joshua trees, broken only by the occasional abandoned gas station or rusted road sign pointing toward ghost towns that had died with the mining boom of the early 1900s. Luna sat alertly in the passenger seat, her intelligent brown eyes scanning the increasingly barren landscape with the kind of focused attention that made Isabella wonder if her canine companions sensed something unusual about their destination. The border collie had always been remarkably intuitive about changes in Isabella's mood and routine. But today her behavior seemed particularly heightened, as if she understood the significance of this journey for their family's future. The GPS on Isabella's phone had lost signal 40 minutes ago, leaving her to navigate using printed directions from the land, auction website, and a collection of topographical maps she had borrowed from the university's geology department. The roads grew progressively narrower and more poorly maintained as she drove deeper into the desert, till she was following what amounted to little more than tire tracks across. Hard-pan dirt marked by occasional faded signs warning travelers about flash flood risks and extreme heat dangers. Isabella's mind raced with both scientific anticipation and maternal anxiety as the miles passed. Every rational part of her brain continued to catalog the reasons why this expedition was a mistake. The unanimous expert opinion against the site's significance, the financial risk she had taken with her children's future, the very real possibility that she was chasing a geological fantasy, born of desperation rather than legitimate scientific intuition. But alongside those doubts ran a current of excitement that Isabella hadn't felt since her graduate school days. When every field expedition held the potential, her mother's ability to find treasure and solve their problems. "This is it, Luna," Isabella said to her four-legged companion as they headed toward the desert highway. "Either we're about to discover something that will secure my children's future forever, or we're about to confirm that their mother has completely lost her mind and destroyed everything Carlos worked to provide for them." The faithful border collie simply wagged her tail, offering the kind of unconditional support that Isabella desperately needed as she drove toward what would either be the vindication of her professional instincts or the confirmation of her scientific colleague's worst fears about her judgment. The 3-hour drive to the Thunderhawk crater took Isabella through some of the most desolate landscapes she had ever encountered. As her Honda Civic left the familiar suburbs of Las Vegas behind, the scenery gradually transformed from urban sprawl to scattered desert communities, then to endless stretches of sagebrush and Joshua trees, broken only by the occasional abandoned gas station or rusted road sign pointing toward ghost towns that had died with the mining boom of the early 1900s. Luna sat alertly in the passenger seat, her intelligent brown eyes scanning the increasingly barren landscape with the kind of focused attention that made Isabella wonder if her canine companions sensed something unusual about their destination. The border collie had always been remarkably intuitive about changes in Isabella's mood and routine. But today her behavior seemed particularly heightened, as if she understood the significance of this journey for their family's future. The GPS on Isabella's phone had lost signal 40 minutes ago, leaving her to navigate using printed directions from the land, auction website, and a collection of topographical maps she had borrowed from the university's geology department. The roads grew progressively narrower and more poorly maintained as she drove deeper into the desert, till she was following what amounted to little more than tire tracks across. Hard-pan dirt marked by occasional faded signs warning travelers about flash flood risks and extreme heat dangers. Isabella's mind raced with both scientific anticipation and maternal anxiety as the miles passed. Every rational part of her brain continued to catalog the reasons why this expedition was a mistake. The unanimous expert opinion against the site's significance, the financial risk she had taken with her children's future, the very real possibility that she was chasing a geological fantasy, born of desperation rather than legitimate scientific intuition. But alongside those doubts ran a current of excitement that Isabella hadn't felt since her graduate school days. When every field expedition held the potential for discovery that could reshape understanding of the natural world, there was something almost electric about the prospect of being the first researcher to properly investigate the Thunderhawk crater with truly open eyes, unbiased by previous conclusions or conventional wisdom about what should and shouldn't be possible in the Nevada desert. The landscape around her was starkly beautiful in its harshness, vast expanses of red and orange sandstone formations sculpted by millennia of wind and water, punctuated by ancient volcanic outcroppings that spoke to the region's tumultuous geological history. Occasionally she passed evidence of human presence, the rusted remains of mining equipment, collapsed wooden structures that had once housed optimistic prospectors, and weathered headframes that marked abandoned mine shafts, whose depths had long since been reclaimed by the desert. As Isabella drove deeper into this geological wonderland, she began to understand why the Thunderhawk crater had captured her imagination so completely. This was a landscape where extraordinary things seemed not only possible, but inevitable. Where the normal rules of geology appeared suspended in favor of more dramatic and mysterious forces. If there was anywhere on Earth where an unprecedented meteorite discovery might be waiting, it would be in exactly this kind of remote, scientifically underexplored terrain. The final turn toward the crater site came after nearly an hour of driving, on unmarked desert roads, guided only by GPS coordinates and Isabella's increasingly uncertain navigation skills. According to her calculations, she should reach the property boundary within the next few miles. Though the landscape ahead looked identical to the dozens of miles she had already traversed in this desert, stretching toward distant mountain ranges under a sky so vast and blue it seemed almost overwhelming. Then, as Isabella crested a low rise in the road, she saw it. The Thunderhawk crater spread before her like a perfect wound in the Earth's surface, its circular rim clearly defined against the surrounding desert floor. From this elevated perspective, the formation's geometric precision was even more striking than the satellite images had suggested. The crater was almost perfectly round, with steep walls that descended into shadows too deep for her to penetrate from this distance. The rim appeared to be approximately 320 feet in diameter, just as the survey reports had indicated. But seeing it in person gave Isabella a visceral understanding of the formation's true scale and dramatic presence in the landscape. More intriguingly, the area immediately surrounding the crater looked subtly different from the rest of the desert. The vegetation was sparser and showed unusual coloration patterns. Some plants appeared larger and more vibrant than their surroundings, while others seemed stunted or discolored in ways that suggested unusual soil chemistry. Even from a distance, Isabella could see that the ground near the crater rim exhibited a different texture and reflectivity than the typical desert hardpan, hinting at mineral compositions that might be genuinely anomalous. "Well, Luna," Isabella said to her companion as she parked the car at the edge of what appeared to be a rough access road leading toward the crater, "this is definitely not what I was expecting." The border collie whined softly and pressed her nose against the passenger window, clearly eager to explore this new environment, but also displaying an unusual level of caution that Isabella found both reassuring and mildly concerning. Luna was typically fearless in outdoor situations, but something about the crater site seemed to be inspiring a more. As she approached the crater's edge, Isabella's excitement continued to build. The formation was even more impressive from close proximity. The walls descended at steep angles. The crater floor was not visible from the rim, hidden in darkness that suggested significant depth and possibly complex internal structures that wouldn't be apparent from aerial or satellite observation. More compelling were the rock formations she had observed from a distance. Up close, these proved to be even more unusual than her binoculars had suggested. Scattered around the crater's perimeter were dozens of irregular stone fragments ranging in size from pebbles to chunks weighing several pounds. These rocks exhibited properties that Isabella had never encountered in her years of geological fieldwork. They appeared to be composed of multiple minerals fused together in ways that suggested exposure to extreme heat and pressure. While their surfaces showed metallic inclusions that created an almost iridescent quality in direct sunlight, Isabella carefully collected several of the smaller fragments, sealing them in sample containers with meticulous documentation of their exact location and orientation. Even this preliminary examination revealed characteristics that were completely inconsistent with typical desert geology. The rocks were significantly denser than they appeared, suggesting high concentrations of metallic elements. More intriguingly, they exhibited subtle magnetic properties that were detectable even without instruments. When Isabella held two fragments near each other, she could feel a slight attraction between them that indicated the presence of magnetized materials. "This is definitely not normal sedimentary rock," Isabella murmured to Luna, who was maintaining a respectful distance from the sample collection process while continuing her own investigation of the area's unique scents and textures. Isabella's preliminary mineral analysis, using portable testing equipment, revealed even more anomalous results. The rock fragments contained iron and nickel in concentrations and ratios that were completely unlike terrestrial minerals, but strongly suggestive of meteorite composition. More surprisingly, the samples also showed trace elements that didn't appear in any of her reference material substances that either represented extremely rare earth minerals or potentially extraterrestrial materials unlike anything in existing scientific literature. But it was when Isabella activated her metal detector near the crater rim that she encountered the first truly extraordinary discovery of her investigation. The device immediately began registering powerful signals indicating the presence of large metallic objects buried beneath the surface. Unlike the scattered readings she might expect from random mineral deposits, the metal detector revealed what appeared to be an organized pattern of buried materials, concentrated masses, at regular intervals around the crater's perimeter, with particularly strong signals emanating from several specific locations that suggested objects of considerable size and density. "Luna, I think we've found something significant here," Isabella said, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific excitement and dawning realization that her instincts about this site had been correct. Isabella spent the next several hours conducting systematic metal detector sweeps around the entire crater perimeter, carefully documenting the location and intensity of every signal. The pattern that emerged was unlike anything she had encountered in her geological career. The buried metallic objects appeared to be distributed in a roughly circular arrangement that corresponded to the crater's rim. The strongest signals, concentrated at points that suggested a geometric precision completely inconsistent with random meteorite fragment distribution. More intriguingly, the metal detector readings indicated that some of the buried objects were enormous masses that could represent meteorite fragments, weighing hundreds or possibly thousands of pounds. If Isabella's preliminary analysis was correct, the Thunderhawk crater might contain one of the largest intact meteorite collections ever discovered, with individual specimens that could be worth millions of dollars to collectors and research institutions. But as Isabella continued her investigation, she began encountering phenomena that challenged her understanding of both meteorite science and basic physics. Several times during her metal detector sweeps, the device's readings fluctuated in ways that suggested the buried objects were somehow changing position or magnetic orientation. This was theoretically impossible. Metallic objects buried in stable geological formations shouldn't exhibit dynamic magnetic properties unless they were being influenced by external forces that didn't exist in this environment. Even more puzzling were the temperature variations Isabella began detecting as the day progressed. Using a handheld infrared thermometer, she discovered that certain areas around the crater rim were several degrees warmer than the surrounding desert floor. Despite being shaded by the same environmental conditions, these thermal anomalies corresponded roughly to the locations where her metal detector had registered the strongest signals, suggesting that the buried objects might be generating or conducting heat in ways that normal meteorite fragments shouldn't. Isabella's scientific training demanded skeptical evaluation of these unusual observations. But the evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss through conventional explanations. Every measurement she took pointed toward the presence of materials with properties that extended beyond typical meteorite characteristics into territory that might require entirely new scientific frameworks to understand properly. As the afternoon sun reached its peak intensity, Isabella decided to attempt her most ambitious investigation of the day using ground-penetrating radar to create detailed images of whatever lay buried beneath the crater floor. This technology would allow her to see the size, shape, and distribution of buried objects without the need for extensive excavation, providing crucial data about the site's potential while minimizing environmental impact. Setting up the ground-penetrating radar equipment required careful calibration and positioning, work that Isabella performed with the methodical precision of someone who understood that this might be her only opportunity to gather comprehensive Data before external pressures forced her to reveal her discoveries to the broader scientific community. The equipment was sophisticated but portable, designed for exactly this kind of geological survey work. Though Isabella suspected she was about to use it in ways its manufacturers had never anticipated, the initial radar sweeps of the crater floor revealed immediately that previous geological surveys had missed crucial information about this site's subsurface characteristics, instead of the solid bedrock that should exist beneath a simple erosional formation. The radar images showed what appeared to be a complex network of spaces and objects extending deep into the earth. The crater floor wasn't solid at all. It appeared to be a relatively thin layer of soil and debris, covering something much more substantial and organized. Most remarkably, the radar images suggested the presence of what could only be described as a large chamber or cavern, approximately 30 feet below the surface, with dimensions that appeared to span nearly the entire width of the crater. This underground space was clearly not a natural geological formation. Its walls were too regular, its proportions too mathematically precise to be explained by water erosion or typical cave-forming processes. "Luna, I think we've discovered something that's going to change everything," Isabella whispered, staring at the radar display with growing amazement and dawning realization of the implications. But it was the objects within this underground chamber that truly defied explanation. The radar images showed what appeared to be multiple large masses suspended within the space objects, with the kind of regular, geometric shapes that suggested artificial construction rather than natural formation. These weren't random meteorite fragments scattered by impact forces. They appeared to be organized structures with intentional design and placement. Isabella spent the remainder of the afternoon conducting increasingly detailed radar sweeps, building a three-dimensional map of the subsurface structures that revealed complexity far beyond anything she had imagined possible. The underground chamber appeared to be part of a larger network of connected spaces, with passages and alcoves that extended outward from the central area in patterns that seemed almost architectural in their organization. More troubling were the indications that this underground complex might not be entirely dormant. Several times during her radar sweeps, Isabella detected what appeared to be movement within the buried structures. Shifts in object positions, or changes in internal configurations that suggested active systems rather than static geological features. This was profoundly unsettling. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Isabella realized that her preliminary investigation had raised far more questions than it had answered. Every piece of evidence she had gathered pointed toward discoveries that would revolutionize understanding of meteorite science, geology, and possibly much more. But the implications were so extraordinary that she was struggling to process them within existing scientific frameworks. The metallic fragments scattered around the crater rim clearly represented extraterrestrial materials with properties unlike anything in current scientific literature. The buried objects revealed by her metal detector and radar sweeps suggested the presence of specimens that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But most significantly, the underground structures indicated that the Thunderhawk crater contained something far more complex and potentially significant than simple meteorite impact remnants. Isabella's first impulse was to contact her university colleagues immediately, sharing her discoveries with the broader scientific community and initiating the kind of comprehensive research effort that a site of this importance deserved. But her experience with Dr. Steinberg, Dr. Blake, and other experts who had dismissed her initial theories made her hesitate. If she revealed her findings too quickly, she risked losing control of the investigation to researchers who might not share her commitment to thorough patient analysis. More concerning were the potential financial and legal implications of her discoveries. If the Thunderhawk crater truly contained meteorite specimens worth hundreds of millions of dollars, there would certainly be individuals and organizations willing to use any means necessary to claim those resources for themselves. Isabella's legal ownership of the property would provide some protection, but she was a single mother with limited resources, facing potential conflicts with entities that might have unlimited funding and few ethical constraints. As Isabella packed her equipment and prepared to return to Las Vegas, she made several crucial decisions that would shape everything that followed. First, she would conduct several more detailed investigations before revealing her discoveries to anyone else, gathering enough evidence to support her findings against inevitable skepticism and challenge. Second, she would seek legal advice about protecting her property rights and controlling access to whatever she had found. Finally, she would begin documenting everything meticulously, creating records that would establish her discoveries and protect her family's interests regardless of what external pressures might emerge. The drive back to Las Vegas took place. In gathering darkness, with Luna sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat and Isabella's mind racing with the implications of what she had discovered, the rock samples secured in her equipment bags represented physical proof of extraterrestrial materials unlike anything in existing scientific collections. The radar data stored in her computer files provided evidence of underground structures that defied conventional geological explanation. Most importantly, the metal detector readings and thermal measurements suggested the presence of objects worth more money than Isabella had ever imagined possible. But alongside her excitement ran currents of concern and uncertainty that Isabella couldn't ignore. She had discovered something extraordinary. But she was also a single mother with 3 children whose financial security depended on her making wise decisions about how to proceed. The Thunderhawk crater represented either the opportunity of a lifetime or the most dangerous situation her family had ever faced. As Isabella pulled into her driveway near midnight, she saw lights still burning in her house and realized that her children had waited up for her return. Despite her instructions that they should go to bed at their normal time, Sophia, Miguel, and Carmen were waiting in the living room, their faces showing the kind of anxious excitement that made Isabella's heart ache with love and protective responsibility. "Mama, did you find treasure?" Carmen asked immediately, rushing to embrace Isabella with the kind of complete trust that reminded her why everything she was doing was ultimately about protecting and providing for these 3 extraordinary souls. "I found something, baby girl," Isabella replied honestly, holding her youngest daughter close, while meeting the more mature gazes of Sophia and Miguel. "I found something that could change our lives forever, but I also found something that's going to require very careful thinking about what we do next." As Isabella looked at her children's face, as eager, trusting, completely dependent on her judgment and protection, she realized that her investigation of the Thunderhawk crater had only just begun. The preliminary discoveries were remarkable, but they were also potentially dangerous in ways that extended far beyond simple scientific research. Whatever lay buried beneath the crater floor represented opportunities and risks that would test every aspect of her courage, wisdom, and determination to protect her family while pursuing the greatest discovery of her scientific career. Samples and data she had collected that day would require weeks of analysis to understand properly. The legal implications of her discoveries would need careful evaluation by experts in mineral rights and property law. Most importantly, the decisions she made about revealing her findings would determine whether her family emerged from this adventure with their dreams fulfilled or their lives forever changed in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But as Isabella tucked her children into bed that night, she felt a deep certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had made the right choice in trusting her scientific instincts over conventional wisdom. The Thunderhawk crater contained secrets that would transform human understanding of the universe, and Isabella Rodriguez had become their guardian and discoverer. The question now was whether she could protect those secrets and her family while navigating the treacherous path between scientific discovery and personal survival. Isabella spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled scientific frenzy, analyzing the samples and data she had collected from the Thunderhawk crater, while maintaining the appearance of normal academic routine for her children and colleagues. The rock fragments she had retrieved proved even more extraordinary under laboratory analysis than her field observations had suggested, exhibiting mineral compositions that challenged fundamental assumptions about extraterrestrial material properties. Working in the university's geology lab during offers when her colleagues were absent, Isabella subjected the samples to every analytical technique available to her. Gresseri crystallography revealed crystal structures unlike anything in existing meteorite databases. Spectroscopic analysis identified trace elements that appeared in no terrestrial reference materials. Most remarkably, the samples exhibited magnetic properties that seemed to strengthen rather than diminish over time, suggesting ongoing chemical processes that defied conventional understanding of metallic mineral behavior. "These readings can't be correct," Isabella muttered to herself for the 10th time that week, staring at computer displays showing mineral compositions that seemed more like science fiction than geological reality. Yet every test she performed confirmed the same impossible results these fragments contained: materials that simply shouldn't exist, according to current scientific knowledge. The most puzzling discovery came when Isabella attempted to determine the age of the samples using standard radiometric dating techniques. Instead of the consistent readings she expected from meteorite material formed billions of years ago, the fragments showed chronological anomalies that suggested multiple formation periods spanning vast stretches of time. Some sections appeared to be ancient beyond measurement, while others seemed to have been created or modified much more recently, possibly within the last few thousand years. Even more disturbing were the samples' responses to various environmental conditions. When Isabella exposed fragments to different temperatures, humidity levels, and electromagnetic fields, they exhibited adaptive behaviors that bordered on the incomprehensible. The materials seemed to actively respond to changes in their surroundings, altering their crystal structures and magnetic properties in ways that suggested some form of internal organization or programming. Isabella's scientific training demanded rigorous skepticism about these observations, but the evidence was becoming overwhelming. She was dealing with materials that possessed characteristics extending far beyond typical meteorite properties into territory that might require entirely new scientific disciplines to understand properly. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying if her analysis was correct. The Thunderhawk crater contained specimens that could revolutionize human understanding of physics, chemistry, and possibly much more. But it was the ground-penetrating radar data that kept Isabella awake at night, staring at computer screens displaying three-dimensional models of the underground structures she had discovered. The more she analyzed the images, the more convinced she became that the buried formations represented technology rather than natural geological features. The chambers showed architectural precision that was impossible to explain through random impact processes, while the suspended objects within them appeared to be arranged according to mathematical principles that suggested intentional design. Most unsettling were the subtle changes Isabella detected when she compared radar scans taken at different times during her crater investigation. Several of the underground objects appeared to have shifted positions slightly between measurements, implying active systems that were somehow responding to her presence or investigations. This was theoretically impossible unless the buried structures contained functional mechanisms that had remained operational for an unknown period of time. Isabella's academic instincts urged her to share these discoveries with the broader scientific community immediately, initiating collaborative research that could properly investigate and validate her findings. But her experience with colleagues who had dismissed her crater purchase made her hesitant to reveal data that seemed too extraordinary for conventional acceptance. Moreover, the potential financial value of her discoveries raised complex questions about intellectual property, resource ownership, and the best methods for protecting her family's interests while advancing scientific knowledge. The decision point came on Thursday evening when Isabella was working late in the university lab, conducting additional spectroscopic analysis of her most unusual rock samples. She had been alone in the building for hours, absorbed in data that continued to challenge every assumption she held about extraterrestrial material properties, when she made a discovery that changed everything. While examining one of the larger fragments under high-powered magnification, Isabella noticed something that her earlier analyses had missed: microscopic inscriptions or patterns etched into the sample's surface with precision that was clearly artificial rather than natural. These markings were incredibly tiny, visible only under extreme magnification, but they appeared to be organized symbols or characters that suggested some form of communication or record-keeping system. Isabella's hands trembled as she adjusted the microscope settings to capture detailed images of these inscriptions. The patterns were unlike any known writing system, but they possessed the kind of organized complexity that clearly indicated intelligent design. More remarkably, the inscriptions appeared to continue throughout the internal structure of the fragment, as if the entire piece had been manufactured or modified using techniques that allowed information to be embedded at molecular levels. This is impossible, Isabella whispered to herself, yet the evidence was undeniable under her microscope's lens. She was looking at what appeared to be artificially created materials, containing embedded information systems of a sophistication that exceeded current human technological capabilities by orders of magnitude. The implications hit Isabella like a physical blow. If these fragments contained artificial inscriptions, they couldn't be natural meteorite material formed through cosmic processes. Instead, they represented manufactured objects created by intelligence and technology far advanced beyond anything in human experience. The Thunderhawk crater wasn't just a meteorite impact site, it was potentially the location of extraterrestrial artifacts that could redefine humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Isabella spent the remainder of that night documenting her discovery of the inscriptions, capturing high-resolution images and conducting additional analyses that confirmed the artificial nature of the patterns. By dawn, she had assembled evidence that would either establish her as one of the most important scientists in human history or destroy her career through association with claims that the academic establishment would consider delusional. But Isabella's scientific training wouldn't allow her to suppress evidence simply because it challenged conventional beliefs. If she had discovered proof of extraterrestrial intelligence, that discovery belonged to all humanity, not just to academic institutions that might lack the courage or vision to accept its implications. The question was how to proceed in ways that protected both the integrity of her findings and her family's safety in what was likely to become an extremely complicated situation. Isabella's first priority was returning to the Thunderhawk crater. For more comprehensive investigation, the inscribed fragments she had found near the surface suggested that much more significant. Discoveries awaited excavation of the underground chambers revealed by her radar scans, but this next phase of research would require equipment and expertise beyond what she could manage alone, while also raising security concerns about protecting the site from premature exposure or interference. Over the weekend, Isabella made careful preparations for what she hoped would be a definitive investigation of the crater's secrets. She assembled advanced excavation equipment borrowed from the university's archaeology department, sophisticated analytical instruments for immediate field testing of discoveries, and comprehensive documentation gear for recording whatever she might find. More importantly, she developed detailed security protocols for protecting her discoveries until she could determine the best methods for revealing them to the world. Isabella's children sensed the importance of what their mother was planning. Though she had been careful not to share details that might frighten them or compromise operational security, Sofia and Miguel, Carmen knew only that their mother had found evidence of valuable materials at the crater site and was planning additional research that could significantly improve their family's financial situation. "Mama, you've been working very late every night this week?" Sophia observed on Sunday evening as Isabella reviewed her equipment lists one final time. "Are you sure you're not pushing yourself too hard with this crater research?" Isabella looked at her eldest daughter, seeing the combination of excitement and concern that had defined Sophia's reactions to the entire crater adventure. At 15, Sophia was mature enough to understand that their family's life was potentially on the verge of dramatic change, but also wise enough to worry about the risks and pressures her mother was accepting to create those opportunities. "Being very careful, Mia," Isabella assured her daughter. "But sometimes in science, you encounter discoveries that are so important they require extraordinary efforts to investigate properly. I think what we've found at the crater falls into that category." Miguel, who had been quietly observing the conversation while working on his mathematics homework, looked up with a serious expression that made him seem older than his 12 years. "Mom, are you sure it's safe for you to go back out there? Alone? Maybe you should bring some of your colleagues with you, or at least tell someone at the university where you're going." Isabella appreciated her son's practical concerns, but she also understood that revealing her discoveries prematurely could result in losing control of research that might ultimately determine her family's future. "I've thought about that, Miguel, But right now, I need to gather more evidence before I can convince other scientists to take this seriously. Sometimes the person who makes the initial discovery has to do the difficult preliminary work alone. Little Carmen, who had been listening while coloring in her favorite book, looked up with a kind of innocent directness that often cuts straight to the heart of complex issues. "Mama, are you going to find something that makes us rich enough to buy a big house with a swimming pool?" The question made Isabella's heart ache with both hope and responsibility. Carmen's dreams were so simple and pure: security, comfort, and the kind of childhood experiences that money could provide. Isabella's discoveries at the Thunderhawk crater could potentially fulfill those dreams beyond anything Carmen could imagine. But they also carried risks that extended far beyond financial considerations. "I don't know exactly what we're going to find, baby girl," Isabella replied honestly. "But whatever happens..." Most unsettling were the subtle changes Isabella detected when she compared radar scans taken at different times during her crater investigation. Several of the underground objects appeared to have shifted positions slightly between measurements, implying active systems that were somehow responding to her presence or investigations. This was theoretically impossible unless the buried structures contained functional mechanisms that had remained operational for an unknown period of time. Isabella's academic instincts urged her to share these discoveries with the broader scientific community immediately, initiating collaborative research that could properly investigate and validate her findings. But her experience with colleagues who had dismissed her crater purchase made her hesitant to reveal data that seemed too extraordinary for conventional acceptance. Moreover, the potential financial value of her discoveries raised complex questions about intellectual property, resource ownership, and the best methods for protecting her family's interests while advancing scientific knowledge. The decision point came on Thursday evening when Isabella was working late in the university lab, conducting additional spectroscopic analysis of her most unusual rock samples. She had been alone in the building for hours, absorbed in data that continued to challenge every assumption she held about extraterrestrial material properties, when she made a discovery that changed everything. The drive to the crater passed more quickly than Isabella remembered, her anticipation and nervous energy making the 3 hours feel like minutes. As she crested the final ridge and saw the Thunderhawk formation spread before her in the early morning light, Isabella felt a surge of recognition and purpose that confirmed her decision to pursue this investigation, despite all rational objections. But something was different about the crater site this morning. As Isabella parked her car and began unloading equipment, she noticed subtle changes that suggested recent activity in the area. Tire tracks that hadn't been present during her previous visit, disturbed ground near the crater rim, and what appeared to be small excavation marks where someone had been digging near the locations where she had found the inscribed fragments. "Luna, I think we might have company," Isabella murmured to her canine companion, who was already displaying the kind of alert behavior that indicated her sensitive nose had detected unfamiliar scents around the crater site. Isabella's first impulse was to retreat immediately, turning to Las Vegas and seeking advice about how to protect her discoveries from what appeared to be unauthorized interference. But her scientific training and personal determination wouldn't allow her to abandon research that could provide definitive answers about the crater's contents. Instead, she decided to proceed with extreme caution, conducting her planned investigation, while remaining alert for signs of continued outside presence. The excavation work Isabella had planned focused on areas where her ground-penetrating radar had indicated the strongest signals from buried objects. Using careful archaeological techniques, she began removing soil and debris from locations that promised to reveal whatever lay beneath the crater floor. The work was physically demanding and methodically slow, but Isabella's excitement grew with every shovelful of earth that brought her closer to potential discoveries. After 3 hours of careful digging, Isabella's excavation tools struck something hard and metallic approximately 4 feet below the surface. The object was clearly artificial rather than natural, a smooth, curved surface that reflected sunlight in ways that suggested advanced metallurgical techniques and materials. As Isabella carefully cleared soil from around the object, its shape and dimensions became increasingly clear. She had discovered what appeared to be a portion of a larger structure, possibly a vessel or container of some kind, constructed from materials that seemed to shift color and texture depending on viewing, angle, and lighting conditions. The surface was covered with the same kind of microscopic inscriptions she had found on the smaller fragments. But here they were organized into larger patterns that suggested complex information systems or technological interfaces. Most remarkably, as Isabella cleaned the last soil from the exposed section, the object began to emit a subtle luminescence that intensified in response to her touch. The inscriptions on its surface seemed to activate when she placed her hands on the metallic material, creating flowing patterns of light. It moved across the object's surface in ways that clearly indicated functional technology rather than mere decoration. "This is incredible," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself as she stared at Clear. Evidence of extraterrestrial technology that exceeded her wildest theoretical speculations. But it was what happened next that transformed Isabella's investigation from remarkable discovery into life-changing encounter with the impossible. As she continued to clear soil from around the object, attempting to determine its full size and configuration, the entire structure began to respond to her excavation efforts. Sections that had been buried for unknown periods of time started to emerge from the earth on their own, as if the object possessed internal systems that were activated by exposure to air and sunlight. Within minutes, Isabella found herself looking at what could only be described as an intact extraterrestrial artifact of enormous sophistication and complexity. The object appeared to be some kind of capsule or pod, approximately 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. Constructed from materials that seemed to incorporate living metal or programmable matter that responded to environmental conditions. Its surface was covered with intricate patterns of inscription and interface elements that suggested advanced information storage and communication capabilities. Most astonishing was the object's apparent awareness of Isabella's presence. As she moved around the artifact, documenting its features and attempting to understand its construction, the surface patterns shifted to track her movements, creating flowing displays of light and color that seemed almost like attempts at communication. The artifact was clearly functional and responsive, suggesting technology that had remained operational for unknown periods while buried beneath the Nevada desert. Isabella's scientific mind struggled to process the implications of what she was experiencing. This wasn't just a meteorite impact site or a collection of valuable extraterrestrial minerals. She had discovered what appeared to be active alien technology that represented capabilities far beyond current human understanding. The value of such a discovery was incalculable, but its scientific and cultural significance could reshape human civilization's understanding of its place in the universe. But alongside her amazement and excitement, Isabella felt growing concerns about the safety and security implications of her discovery. If the artifact possessed functional technology, there was no way to predict how it might respond to continued investigation. Moreover, the evidence of recent unauthorized activity at the crater site suggested that other parties were already aware of the location's significance and might be monitoring her research efforts. As Isabella stood beside the exposed alien artifact in the harsh Nevada sunlight, watching patterns of light flow across its surface in apparent response to her presence, she realized that her life had just changed irrevocably. She was no longer simply a single mother in part-time geology, professor struggling to provide for her children. She had become the guardian of humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The decisions she made in the coming hours and days would determine not only her family's future, but potentially the course of human history. The Thunderhawk crater contained secrets that could transform scientific understanding, technological capabilities, and humanity's relationship with the cosmos. But those same secrets also carried risks and responsibilities that Isabella was only beginning to comprehend. As the afternoon sun reached its peak intensity, Isabella made the most important decision of her life. Rather than attempting to extract or further expose the artifact, she would document its current state as thoroughly as possible, and then carefully rebury it until she could arrange for proper protection and investigation support. The discovery was too important to risk losing through premature exposure or interference from parties who might not share her commitment to responsible scientific research. But even as Isabella began the careful process of reconcealing her extraordinary discovery, she knew that there was no returning to her previous life. She had found proof of extraterrestrial intelligence and technology that would ultimately change everything for her family and for humanity as a whole. The only question now was whether she could navigate the complex challenges ahead while protecting both her discoveries and the people she loved most in the world. The crater had revealed its greatest secret. Isabella Rodriguez had become the first human being to encounter technology from another world. The responsibility was overwhelming. The opportunities were limitless. And the dangers were just beginning to emerge as Isabella prepared to leave the crater site. With knowledge that would transform her from an unknown academic into one of the most important people on Earth, Isabella's careful reburial of the alien artifact took nearly 4 hours, during which she meticulously documented every detail of its configuration, while ensuring its protection from environmental exposure and potential discovery by unauthorized parties. As she worked, the artifact's surface patterns continued to pulse with gentle luminescence, as if acknowledging her efforts to preserve its security. The experience of interacting with active extraterrestrial technology had fundamentally altered Isabella's understanding of humanity's place in the universe, but it had also thrust her into a position of responsibility that extended far beyond scientific discovery. The drive back to Las Vegas that evening was unlike any journey Isabella had ever undertaken. Her car contained physical evidence of contact with alien intelligence, detailed photographs, video recordings, and additional samples that could prove the existence of extraterrestrial technology to anyone willing to examine the data objectively. But Isabella also carried the weight of decisions that could affect not only her family's future but potentially the course of human civilization. During the 3-hour drive through darkening desert landscape, Isabella's mind raced through the implications of her discovery and the challenges she would face in the coming days. The artifact represented technology so advanced that its mere existence challenged fundamental assumptions about physics, engineering, and the development of intelligence in the universe. Its potential applications could revolutionize energy production, materials, science, communication systems, and countless other fields that formed the foundation of modern civilization. But Isabella's academic experience had taught her that revolutionary discoveries often attracted attention from parties whose interests extended far beyond scientific advancement. If word of the alien artifact reached the wrong people before she could establish proper protections, her family could become targets of corporate espionage, government interference, or criminal organizations seeking to profit from extraterrestrial technology without regard for its broader implications for humanity. As Isabella approached the outskirts of Las Vegas, she noticed a black SUV in her rearview mirror that had been maintaining a consistent distance behind her for the past 30 miles. The vehicle's behavior suggested surveillance rather than coincidental travel, indicating that her activities at the Thunderhawk crater were already attracting attention from unknown parties. Isabella's heart rate increased as she realized that the security concerns she had been developing theoretically were becoming immediate, practical threats to her family's safety. Rather than driving directly home, Isabella took a circuitous route through suburban Las Vegas, making several unexpected turns and stops to confirm whether the SUV was actually following her. The vehicle's persistent presence behind her, combined with its occupants' apparent efforts to remain inconspicuous, convinced Isabella that professional surveillance teams were already monitoring her movements. This development suggested that information about her crater discoveries had somehow reached organizations with the resources and motivation to investigate her research activities. Isabella's first priority was ensuring her children's immediate safety, while she determined the scope and nature of the threats they might be facing. Instead of returning to their house, she drove to the home of her sister Maria, who lived in a different part of the city and had often served as emergency childcare during Isabella's academic travels. Maria's house would provide temporary security. While Isabella developed strategies for protecting her family and her discoveries, "Isabella, what's wrong?" Maria asked, immediately upon seeing her sister's tense expression and urgent demeanor. "You look like you've seen a ghost. I need you to watch the kids for a few days," Isabella said without preamble. "Something has come up with my crater research that requires immediate attention, and I don't want them at the house until I can sort out some security issues. Maria Rodriguez Shen was 5 years older than Isabella and had built a successful career as a criminal defense attorney, giving her practical experience with dangerous situations and protective protocols. She immediately recognized the seriousness of her sister's concerns without requiring detailed explanations. "Are you in some kind of legal trouble?" Maria asked, her attorney instincts focusing on potential criminal implications. "Got it. Someone is threatening you over property rights or research claims. There are legal remedies that don't require you to handle this alone." Isabella appreciated her sister's offer of legal assistance, but she also understood that the situation she was facing extended far beyond conventional legal frameworks. "It's more complicated than property rights," she explained carefully. "I've discovered something at the crater that could be extremely valuable, and I think other parties have become aware of my research. I need to establish proper protections before this gets out of hand." Over the next hour, Isabella briefed Maria on the essential details of her crater discoveries, while avoiding specifics that might compromise operational security or put her sister in danger through excessive knowledge. She explained that the site contained extraterrestrial materials of unprecedented scientific and commercial value, that her research had attracted surveillance from unknown parties, and that she needed time to arrange proper legal and physical protection for her findings. Maria's legal training helped her immediately grasp the complexity of Isabella's situation. "You're dealing with potential intellectual property worth millions of dollars, mineral rights that could involve federal jurisdiction, and security threats from parties who might not respect legal boundaries," she summarized. "This isn't something you can handle alone, Isabella. You need professional help from people who specialize in exactly these kinds of situations." But even as Maria spoke, Isabella was receiving text messages on her phone that confirmed her worst fears about the speed with which her situation was escalating. Dr. Margaret Steinberg had sent an urgent message requesting an immediate meeting to discuss significant developments related to Isabella's crater research. Dr. Harrison Blake had left a voicemail asking her to contact him as soon as possible regarding important information about the Thunderhawk site. Most concerning, she had received a message from an unknown number offering to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements related to her recent geological discoveries. "They already know," Isabella told Maria, showing her the messages. "Somehow, information about what I found has reached people I never told about my research. That means either my communications are being monitored, or someone has been conducting independent surveillance of the crater site." Maria's expression hardened as she read the messages. "Isabella, these aren't academic inquiries. Someone is sending signals that they have leverage over your research and want to negotiate from a position of strength. That's the kind of language I see in cases involving corporate espionage and intellectual property theft." As if to confirm Maria's assessment, Isabella's phone rang with a call from another unknown number. She hesitated, then answered with the speaker activated so her sister could hear the conversation. "Dr. Rodriguez," said a polished male voice that carried the kind of authority associated with significant financial resources. "My name is David Chen, and I represent a consortium of investors who are very interested in discussing your recent discoveries at the Thunderhawk crater site. We understand that you've encountered some unusual materials that could have substantial commercial applications." Isabella felt her blood run cold at the realization that strangers not only knew about her discoveries, but had enough detailed information to reference specific aspects of her research. "I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what you're referring to," she replied, trying to maintain neutral tone while her mind raced through the implications. "Dr. Rodriguez, please don't insult our intelligence." David Chen continued with the kind of smooth confidence that suggested extensive experience in these types of negotiations. "We have comprehensive information about your crater research activities, including documentation of the unusual materials you've discovered and the potential applications they represent. We're prepared to offer you a partnership arrangement that would provide substantial financial compensation, while ensuring that your discoveries receive proper development and protection." The caller's knowledge was so specific and detailed that Isabella realized her activities had been under professional surveillance for an unknown period of time. "What kind of partnership are you proposing?" she asked, hoping to gather information about their capabilities and intentions. We're prepared to offer you $50 million for exclusive access to your crater discoveries, plus ongoing royalty payments for any commercial applications we develop, Chen replied. In exchange, you would provide us with complete documentation of your research and grant us unlimited access to the crater site for further investigation and development. The offer was staggering in its scope and implications. $50 million would provide more financial security than Isabella had ever imagined possible, ensuring her children's educational futures and eliminating every financial concern her family had faced since Carlos's death. But the terms being proposed would also surrender control of potentially the most important discovery in human history to unknown parties whose motivations and intentions she couldn't evaluate. I appreciate your interest, Isabella replied carefully, but I need time to consider any business proposals. My research is still in preliminary stages, and I haven't yet determined the full scope of what I've discovered. Dr. Rodriguez. Chen's voice carried a subtle note of warning that made Isabella's protective instincts flare with alarm. I hope you understand that opportunities like this don't remain available indefinitely. Other parties are also aware of your discoveries, and not all of them are as committed to mutually beneficial arrangements as we are. I would strongly encourage you to consider our offer seriously and respond within the next 48 hours. The call ended, leaving Isabella and Maria staring at each other in stunned silence. The conversation had confirmed that multiple organizations with substantial resources were already competing for access to Isabella's discoveries. And their approaches suggested willingness to use pressure tactics that extended beyond conventional business negotiations. Isabella, you're in serious danger, Maria said bluntly. These people aren't making business offers, they're delivering ultimatums. If they have enough information to make specific proposals about your research they've been conducting. Surveillance operations that probably include your home, your workplace, and possibly your children's activities. The realization that her discoveries had potentially put Sofia, Miguel, and Carmen at risk filled Isabella with a combination of protective fury and desperate determination to resolve the situation before it escalated further. Her scientific breakthrough had become a threat to everything she loved most in the world, but retreat was no longer possible. Too many parties already knew about the crater discoveries, and attempting to abandon her research would simply ensure that others claimed the benefits while her family remained vulnerable to retaliation. I need legal protection, and I need it immediately, Isabella told her sister. Can you help me contact attorneys who specialize in intellectual property rights and personal security issues? Maria was already reaching for her laptop. I'm calling Patricia Morrison, who handles complex intellectual property cases involving government and corporate conflicts. She's also going to put you in touch with security consultants who know how to protect families in exactly these situations. While Maria made initial contact with legal and security professionals, Isabella called her children to explain that they would be staying with their aunt for several days. While she resolved some complicated issues with her crater research, Sofia, Miguel, and Carmen accepted the arrangement with the kind of trust that made Isabella's heart ache with gratitude and determination to protect them from the dangerous forces that her discoveries had unleashed. Over the next 72 hours, Isabella's life transformed completely as she worked with legal and security experts to establish protections for her family and her discoveries. Patricia Morrison proved to be exactly the kind of attorney Isabella needed, someone with extensive experience in high-stakes intellectual property disputes involving multiple jurisdictions and powerful corporate interests. Your situation is extraordinary in several respects, Patricia explained during their first meeting. You've discovered materials on property you legally own, which gives you strong ownership rights under mineral rights law. But the potential value and significance of your discoveries means you're dealing with parties who may not respect legal boundaries if they believe the stakes are high enough. Patricia's first recommendation was filing immediate legal documentation, establishing Isabella's ownership of all materials discovered on her property, along with injunctions preventing unauthorized access to the crater site. Simultaneously, she arranged for professional security teams to monitor Isabella's home and her family's activities while providing protection against surveillance and potential interference. But it was Patricia's second recommendation that proved Most crucial for Isabella's long-term strategy. You need to control the narrative about your discoveries before others do it for you, she explained. If you can establish yourself as the legitimate scientific discoverer through proper channels, you'll have much stronger protection against attempts to seize or discredit your work. This advice led Isabella to make the most important decision of her scientific career, revealing her extraterrestrial discoveries to the world through simultaneous announcements to major scientific journals, news organizations, and government agencies. Rather than allowing her findings to be controlled by corporate interests or suppressed by security concerns, Isabella chose to ensure that her discoveries belonged to all humanity. The announcement Isabella prepared was comprehensive and carefully crafted to maximize credibility while maintaining security over the most sensitive aspects of her findings. She documented the discovery of extraterrestrial materials with properties unlike anything in existing scientific literature. She provided evidence of artificial inscriptions indicating intelligent design and revealed the existence of active technology that suggests an ongoing extraterrestrial presence or monitoring of Earth. But Isabella was careful to omit specific location details and technical specifications that could allow unauthorized parties to locate or exploit her discoveries before proper scientific and security protocols could be established. Her goal was to establish her credibility as the discoverer while maintaining control over access to the crater site and its contents. The response to Isabella's announcement exceeded every expectation she had developed about public reaction to proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. Within hours of her press release, every major news organization in the world was reporting on the discovery. Scientific institutions were requesting access to her data and samples, and government agencies were initiating contact about national security implications, more importantly for Isabella's immediate concerns. Her public revelation of the discoveries had neutralized the leverage that corporate and criminal interests had been attempting to establish through threats and ultimatums. It was no longer possible for any single party to control or suppress information about the crater findings, which provided Isabella and her family with protection through transparency rather than secrecy. Dr. Margaret Steinberg was among the first colleagues to contact Isabella after her announcement, her previous skepticism replaced by amazement and professional respect. "Isabella, I owe you a tremendous apology," she said during their phone conversation. "I should have supported your instincts instead of dismissing them based on conventional assumptions. What you've accomplished represents the greatest scientific discovery in human history." Similar acknowledgments came from Dr. Harrison Blake, Dr. Susan Chen, and every other expert who had originally criticized Isabella's crater purchase as a foolish mistake driven by desperation rather than scientific judgment. Their recognition was personally satisfying. But Isabella understood that vindication was less important than ensuring her discoveries were developed responsibly for humanity's benefit. The financial implications of Isabella's announcement were immediate and staggering. Within days of revealing her extraterrestrial discoveries, she received offers from technology companies, research institutions, and government agencies totaling over $300 million for various forms of access to her findings. But Isabella had learned from her recent experiences that financial opportunities also carried risks and responsibilities that extended far beyond personal wealth. Working with Patricia Morrison and international legal experts, Isabella established the Thunderhawk Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to managing access to her discoveries while ensuring that any technological developments would benefit global scientific advancement rather than private profit. The foundation's structure provided Isabella financial security while maintaining her control over research priorities and ethical guidelines for technology development. 6 months after her initial crater discovery, Isabella stood once again at the rim of the Thunderhawk Formation. But now she was accompanied by an international team of scientists, security personnel, and legal observers representing the most comprehensive extraterrestrial research effort in human history. The crater site had been designated an international scientific preserve. It's protected by agreements between multiple governments and organizations committed to responsible investigation of humanity's first confirmed contact with alien intelligence. The alien artifact Isabella had discovered remained in its original location, But now it was being studied using technologies and methodologies that exceeded anything available during her initial investigations. The inscriptions on its surface had been partially decoded, revealing information about energy systems, material sciences, and communication technologies that were already beginning to revolutionize human understanding of physics and engineering. Most remarkably, the artifact had begun responding more actively to human presence as investigation techniques became more sophisticated. It appeared to be some form of teaching device or cultural exchange system designed to share technological knowledge with intelligent species that demonstrated readiness for advanced scientific concepts. The entity or civilization that had created it remained mysterious, but their intentions seemed benevolent rather than threatening. "Mom, this is incredible," Sophia said as she stood beside Isabella, watching scientific teams conduct careful analysis of the alien technology. 16, Sophia had become one of the youngest people ever granted access to extraterrestrial research, her marine biology interests expanding to include astrobiology and the search for life throughout the universe. Miguel, now 13, was equally fascinated by the mathematical principles embedded in the artifact's design. The geometric patterns in those inscriptions follow formulas that our computers can barely analyze. He observed with the kind of analytical precision that suggested a promising future in scientific research. Whoever made this understands mathematics in ways we're just beginning to discover. Even Carmen, at 9 years old, grasped the significance of what their mother had accomplished. "Mama, you really did find treasure from space," she said with the innocent wonder that had characterized her response to the entire adventure. "And now, scientists from all over the world come to study what you discovered." As Isabella watched her children exploring the research site that had transformed their lives, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a seemingly foolish decision to purchase a worthless crater in the Nevada desert. Every expert had called her insane for risking her family's financial security on geological speculation. But those same experts were now acknowledging that her discovery represented the most important advancement in human knowledge since the development of agriculture. The Thunderhawk Foundation had indeed provided financial security beyond Isabella's wildest dreams. But more importantly, it had established frameworks for ensuring that extraterrestrial technology would be developed for humanity's benefit rather than private profit. Isabella's discovery was already contributing to advances in clean energy, medical technology, environmental restoration, and space exploration that promised to address many of humanity's most pressing challenges. But perhaps the greatest transformation was in how humanity understood its place in the universe. Isabella's proof of extraterrestrial intelligence had confirmed that Earth was part of a larger cosmic community, opening possibilities for communication and knowledge exchange that could guide human civilization toward unprecedented advances in science, technology, and social development. Dr. Patricia Morrison would become both Isabella's legal advisor and close friend. Join the Rodriguez family at the crater rim as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western horizon. "Isabella, I've been working with technology companies and research institutions for 20 years, but I've never seen anything like the changes your discovery is creating," she observed. "The innovations emerging from artifact research are already transforming industries and solving problems that seemed intractable just months ago." Isabella nodded, watching teams of international scientists conducting their careful investigation of technology that exceeded human capabilities by orders of magnitude. The financial value was never really the point, she reflected. What matters is ensuring that these discoveries help humanity grow and develop in positive directions. As the research teams concluded their daily work and began securing equipment. For the evening, Isabella took a final walk around the crater rim with Luna, whose faithful companionship had provided emotional support throughout the entire extraordinary adventure. The border collie was now something of a celebrity herself, known throughout the scientific community as the dog, who had accompanied humanity's first ambassador to extraterrestrial intelligence. "You know," Luna Isabella said as they watched, "the sunset paint the crater walls in shades of gold and crimson. When I bought this land, everyone thought I was crazy. Dr. Steinberg, Dr. Blake, even my own sister thought I was risking everything on a geological fantasy." Luna wagged her tail. with the kind of unconditional support that had sustained Isabella through months of doubt and criticism before her vindication. The dog seemed to understand that their adventure had not only transformed the Rodriguez family's circumstances, but had fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. As Isabella prepared to return to Las Vegas that evening, she took one last look at the crater that had changed everything. The alien artifact continued its patient work beneath the desert floor, sharing technological knowledge with human scientists, while waiting for humanity to develop the wisdom necessary to use such powerful tools responsibly. The journey from struggling single mother to guardian of humanity's most important discovery had been extraordinary in every respect. But Isabella understood that her real work was just beginning. The Thunderhawk crater had revealed that humans were not alone in the universe, and that revelation carried responsibilities that would extend far beyond any individual lifetime. But as Isabella drove home to Las Vegas with her children, Luna, and the satisfaction of knowing she had made the right choice in trusting her instincts over expert opinion, she felt a deep contentment about the path their lives had taken. A woman who had been ridiculed for buying a worthless crater had discovered treasure beyond imagination, not just financial wealth, but proof that the universe held wonders and possibilities that human courage and curiosity could unlock for the benefit of all civilization. The Thunderhawk crater would continue revealing its secrets for generations to come. But Isabella Rodriguez had already secured her place in history as the person brave enough to look beyond conventional wisdom and discover that sometimes the most extraordinary treasures are hidden in the places everyone else considers worthless. Her children would grow up in a world transformed by their mother's discovery, and humanity itself would advance toward a future guided by the knowledge that intelligence and wisdom extended far beyond the boundaries of Earth. The crater that experts had dismissed as worthless had indeed contained $300 million worth of extraterrestrial materials. But its true value lay in opening humanity's eyes to the infinite possibilities waiting to be discovered by those bold enough to pursue their dreams despite universal ridicule. Isabella's story had become proof that sometimes the most important discoveries require the courage to be called insane by those who lack the vision to see beyond accepted limitations. And in the end, Isabella Rodriguez, the single mother who had dared to dream of finding treasure in a hole in the desert, had given humanity its greatest gift, the knowledge that we are not alone, and that the universe holds wonders beyond our wildest imagination for those brave enough to seek them. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.